There is an order to life that we all quietly believe in, that children grow to bury their parent. When this order is broken, grief becomes a profound type of pain. Many films try to discuss grief in attempts to portray what's known for humans as the most painful experience, which is losing a loved one. Hamnet is one of them. Regardless the story's simplicity, Hamnet has touched the bottom of my heart in a way that no other film could. That's why in this video I will talk about how grief is represented as a main theme in the story, and how it's conveyed brilliantly as a central conflict between our main character. Our first encounter is with Agnes, who lives in the countryside and is raised by her stepmother. Agnes has a spiritual bond with nature that is rooted into her background. The forest said to have once sheltered her enchanted mother, which is a trait that she inherited from her. Her difficult childhood and the early loss of her mother at a young age shaped a stubborn and strong personality, one grounded in personal intuition rather than the expectations of others or the limits of the society around her. Her search for a safe refuge for her nature leads her to meet the other main character, William, a young man who's ambitious and dreamy, who comes from a middle-class family and expected to follow in his father's trade. These same differences in character that intrigues them together in a romantic relationship are the same which determine how later deal with their tragedy differently, making their bond a dramatic field of conflict. The relationship at start, which is not accepted by either family, eventually brings them 3 children, an eldest daughter and twins, a boy and a girl. But a tragedy occurs and wrecks the world they created, and challenges the bond they nurtured along the years. As we watch our main characters grow, the death of their son comes as a tragedy on both of them. The loss of their son for illness evokes each one of them in a different journey than the other, making each one of them deal with the loss in their own way, but also dividing them, creating a distance between the couple in a way that they become estranged from each other. William goes back to the city, chasing his career, while his wife stays at home taking care of the house and kid, and dealing with her pain on her own. The sweetheart couple, once they were, now are looking at the world through different lenses. It is known in drama writing that for a character to grow, they need to break. It's a transcultural notion in every story that a character is introduced in a normal world at first, then challenged by an inciting incident that shatters their belief system and sets them up for a journey for self-discovery and change. However, the death of Hamnet is presented somewhere near the half of the story, making it the midpoint that sets out main characters into another trajectory of life, which is dealing with grief. Grief in Hamnet is a thematic cornerstone, even though presented later in the story, but it has been foreshadowed since the beginning of the movie, starting from the shot of the eagle flying in the sky, and also the black dark cave, only symbolization of Hamnet's transcendence to the afterlife. Even the story starts as a romance, but it shifts into a heavy theme of loss, mourning, and grief as a central theme of the story. To me, this story isn't about William Shakespeare or his play. Many films and novels try to portray his legendary career, and this one of few which revealed William's identity till the end, because it didn't matter. We didn't watch because it was about the classical famous writer. We watched because it mattered to us. This film is about the experience of losing someone we love, and how to deal with the emptiness that it causes after their departure. After losing someone, people experience an emotional burden of insufferable pain, self-blame, memorizing the dead, feeling of emptiness and melancholic mood. Our main characters are no different. Their loss sets them in a journey of finding new meanings for their loss, as it is known that people tend to question their beliefs about life after losing a dear one. The lost presence of the abandoned evokes a feeling of emptiness in the external world, therefore its meaning. Their presence, that one day filled us with joy, laughter, and meaning, is now also gone with the dead. The mourner, which is in this case William and Agnes, is left with an unspeakable burden of hollowness that has to be filled with new meanings and endeavors that will never compensate the loss, but only to help them lighten their pain. Grief isn't just a thematic setup in the story, but also a cornerstone of conflict between the couple. The death of their son has now laid its shadows on their relationship, challenging and questioning the strengths of their bond, and distancing the couple from each other. After the death of their son, the couple struggles not only with the sufferance of the loss, but also with the blame they put onto each other, mainly because of William's absence during his son's illness, building tension between the two of them and setting each one of them into a different direction of dealing with sorrow. Grief is known to challenge the identity of oneself, as well as the dyad. It shatters their hopes, dreams, and their way of looking at the world, and most importantly, the couple's identity. especially when one of them has to deal with unresolved grief. Besides his absence, the unexpressed mourning of the husband over their loss triggers tension from Agnes, who expressed her grief openly through weeping, screaming, and crying, laying her burden out there in the open. Unlike her husband, who struggles to express any kind of mourning, not out of carelessness or indifference as he likes to imply himself to be,
I am myself indifferent honest. But yet I could accuse me of such things that it were better my mother had not borne me.
but from a standpoint of someone who expresses self-struggle differently from his wife. This difference between them impeds the couple to process the loss in mismatched lines. For the couple to heal, it's important that the suffering to be shareable, explicit, and expressed in order to be resolved. But a partner who struggles to be present fails to recognize the pain of the other part, encouraging more closeness and distance. In couple psychoanalysis, the dyad is trapped in a linked relationship, in which each partner portrays the other one in a certain image and invests their psychic energy into them. When the partner is not aligned with the other's self-image, a disappointment will arise from the other part. In other words, we unconsciously expect our partner to reflect our emotions back to us. Otherwise, our presence and pain doesn't matter to them. Therefore, we feel unheard and unseen. In despair, each partner functions as a mirror of reflection for the other one. When one of them isn't mirroring sympathy and vulnerability when it needs to be, the wound of losing deepens and settles a conflictual argument between the conjoined. Not only that, but also traumatic events trigger earlier traumas and unresolved losses. Agnes, in this situation, has lost her mother in her early years, which makes her prone and vulnerable to every loss in her later adult life, creating another hazard between her and her husband's unexpressed sorrow. In this relationship, William is trapped in the role of the father and husband and provider, misaligning him with his natural talents and dreams. In the death of their son, he is expected by his wife to be more emotionally prolific, which is a misalignment itself for William's personality, pushing him to depart again to the city, pursuing his dream, all of which setting a crack in their relationship, along with the difference on how each one of them expresses grief. This is again a central conflict in this story. For William, who's been busy chasing his creative career in the city, leaving the wife battling their son's illness alone shows what Agnes views as not enough sadness nor grief. He seems to Agnes occupied by his work and creative endeavors, putting his goals above the sufferance they have to endure, as if all the beautiful things they created and shared, including their beautiful boy, are a little to mourn for. However, for William's personality, he doesn't come from a background or place as far as we know where expressing emotions openly is cherished and nurtured. He comes from a strict home, raised by a strict father, making his outlets of expressing grief different than his wife. His particularity and artistic talent allows him to express himself in other special ways. Through writing and stage, William is allowed to express his despair as well as his self-blame. The self-hate caused by unresolved grief is prevalent in the mourner's oneself, as he doesn't only blame himself on the departure of his loss, but also on his inability to grieve the loss, as well as his ambition that sent him away from his family. He feels responsible for the tragedy. What was his dream now feels like a duty to pay back. Being an artist, William is able to express his internal conflict into sublimated outlets, the stage. In his case, he created what is to be his masterpiece, Hamnet. He expressed what he couldn't communicate with his wife in a direct way. A storyteller does what he does best, which is communicating through story. The same way William expresses his interest in Agnes with the Greek mythology story of Orpheus and Eurydice, he also dissolves his grief, regret, and self-blame into the stage, connecting the internal struggle to the exterior world, and most importantly, to his wife, turning his pain into an artistic achievement, symbolizing his sufferings in a literature legacy that will live forever. In this way, William reaches the point of resolving grief, acknowledging the pain in a cathartic play, and bringing the unconscious to the conscious, finally shedding the light on the darkness. That's why we see Agnes smiling at the end of the play. She gets to feel her husband's pain, in a cathartic medium which is the stage. At that moment, both her pain and his became one, making their misery expressed, therefore resolved. This story is cathartic because it has done many things right. First, they picked on a heavy, experienced emotion in human beings, which is loss. Second, they told a simple story about a couple but with a very much of emotional depth and richness, starting as a romantic story, then shifting it into a story about grief. And third, The main antagonist of this story is a very common one in our daily life, which is the struggle with our internal ego, making grief an internal conflict for each character, an external one between the couple themselves. Despite the magnificent setting and the heavy work of the actors, the writing in this film is crafted very thoughtfully, as they manage to balance the significance of both main characters by giving each one of them different backgrounds and different type of emotional depth, connecting them through a romantic discourse, but setting them in a conflict based on how each one of them deals with loss and mourning. Grief plays the role of a main theme, as well as a central conflict for the main character. With its emotional heaviness and great production, Hamnet will be for me one of the best cinematic work about loss. I share deep dives about psychology theory and storytelling. If that's something you'd like to learn about, this is the right page for you.